Have you ever stopped to think about how some people, maybe folks without finance backgrounds, just seem to quietly build wealth, while others, maybe brilliant people, seem to constantly struggle with money?
Yeah.
Well, today we're kind of flipping the script on how we approach money. This isn't your typical deep dive into complex charts or jargon. Nope, it's about something much more, well, human, the psychology behind it all. We're digging into Morgan Housel's fantastic book, The Psychology of Money. And what's so refreshing is that it really steps away from standard investment tips. It focuses instead on how our inner world, our feelings, our past experiences shapes our financial lives in really surprising ways.
Exactly. Housel really centers on behavioral finance. It's all about understanding how, our emotions, the biases we all have, maybe how we were raised, and just our unique personal journeys profoundly affect how we deal with money. It often turns out that success isn't just about IQ points or crunching numbers. It's much more about what Housel calls these soft skills.
Soft skills,
Yeah.
like emotional control.
Yeah, things like emotional discipline, patience, and honestly, just knowing your own limits and tendencies.
Okay, let's unpack this. What makes this deep dive into money so different from what you might expect? I mean, what initially grabbed me was how Housel immediately says financial success isn't really about pure intelligence.
Right, he jumps straight into that. It's the behavioral side that matters most. We're often fed this line that you need formal training, deep market knowledge. But Housel points out, look, people with zero formal finance education can build incredible wealth. How? Through simple good habits they actually stick with.
Sticking with it seems key.
It is. The core idea is, like he says, emotional discipline often matters more than market knowledge. He puts it so clearly. Financial success is not a hard science, it's a soft skill.
That phrase, soft skill, really lands. And it connects to another point of his that I love. A plan you can stick with is better than the perfect plan you'll abandon. It feels like permission to be, well, reasonable rather than purely rational all the time. How does that play out practically?
Oh, it's huge. It means you don't have to beat yourself up for not making the absolute optimal choice every single time, the one a spreadsheet says is perfect. Personal finance isn't about maximizing every theoretical dollar. It's really about finding a sustainable path, something that works for you over the long haul, like decades.
Just staying on track.
Exactly. Staying reasonable, staying consistent, and crucially, avoiding those really big mistakes that can completely derail you. And, we should remember, everyone finds money decisions tough sometimes. It's not a problem you just solve once. It's a relationship you manage your whole life. And our emotions, fear, greed, maybe shame about past stuff, hope for the future, they're always in the mix, influencing us more than we think.
That's a really important point. So if it's not just about smarts and emotional control, what else is going on? What are these other, maybe less obvious forces at play? Here's where it gets really interesting. Housel talks a lot about factors we tend to downplay, specifically luck and risk. We love attributing everything to skill, don't we?
We do. But he makes a really compelling case. Think about Bill Gates, obviously brilliant, right? But Housel highlights how incredibly rare access to a computer as a teenager was a huge factor in his early start. Pure luck, in a way.
An accident of timing and location.
Precisely. It's a
Yeah.
reminder not to judge results in a vacuum. Sometimes a decision that looks like a failure in hindsight was actually the right call based on what you knew then. You just got unlucky. You can have a great strategy, but things outside your control can still mess it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that connects to another idea he has. Tails drive everything. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. This is fascinating. In investing, and probably lots of areas, a very small number of events or decisions produce a vast majority of the results. Think venture capital, most investments fail, maybe spectacularly. But the one or two huge successes, the long tails, pay for all the losses, and then some.
So you don't have to be right all the time.
Not even close. You can be wrong quite often, even most of the time, but still come out way ahead if you capture a few of those massive wins. It shifts the focus from constant accuracy to patience and endurance.
Endurance. Okay, so that leads directly to why it's so critical to, as he puts it, stay in the game, right? You need to be around long enough for those tail events to happen.
Exactly. You need resilience built into your financial life. This is why Housel stresses saving money, not just for a specific target like a house deposit, but simply to stay in the game. It's about building that buffer, that margin of safety. So when markets inevitably dip or you face a personal setback, you aren't forced to sell assets or make desperate choices at the worst possible time.
So resilience and consistent saving are the real wealth builders, not necessarily chasing the absolute highest return. returns.
That's the core message. It's that steady, persistent approach.
So what does this all mean for you listening? If the goal is to stay in the game, how do you actually do that? Well, it really boils down to diversifying, doesn't it? To avoid single points of failure. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, whether that's one job, one type of investment, or one really risky bet. You need options so you can recover if one thing goes wrong.
Absolutely. Diversification is fundamental to resilience.
And thinking about resilience and patience,
Mm-hmm.
it also makes you question what we're even aiming for with money.
Uh-huh.
Housel talks about this dangerous idea of never enough.
Mm-hmm. The cautionary tale he uses of Rajat Gupta is chilling. Here's a guy who had it all, billionaire, CEO status, yet he risked everything for more through insider trading and ended up in jail.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder that just chasing more indefinitely isn't just unsatisfying, it can be actively destructive. The book really pushes you to figure out what enough looks like for you. Define your own finish line for your peace of mind.
Defining enough. That's powerful. And related to that, one of the most, I think, profound ideas in the book is this. Freedom is the ultimate dividend. He argues the real payoff of wealth isn't flashy stuff. It's not the fancy car, the huge house. It's controlling your time, your life.
Yes, autonomy. The ability to wake up and say, I can do what I want today. That freedom, Housel argues, is worth far more than any luxury good.
So saving money isn't just for emergencies or retirement.
It's literally buying freedom. Every dollar you save is buying you a little bit more control over your future, more options, less dependence on a paycheck or pleasing a boss. You're building choices.
But we humans, we still like to show off, right? Which leads to his man in the car paradox. Can you explain that one? It's quite striking.
It really is. He observes that when we see someone driving, say, a really expensive Ferrari, we rarely think, wow, that driver must be cool.
What do we think?
We usually think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. We admire the car, the object, not the person in it. The attempt to signal wealth often just makes people admire the wealth itself, not the owner.
Huh. That's so true when you think about it. The signal gets misdirected.
Completely. And this ties straight into another huge insight. Wealth is what you don't see. Real wealth isn't the stuff you buy. That's spending. That's money gone. True wealth is the money not spent. It's the savings, the investments, the assets quietly growing, unseen by others. There's a massive difference between being rich, having high income, maybe spending a lot, and being wealthy, having accumulated assets that provide security and options.
What stands out to you about this invisible wealth concept? For me, it's that quiet confidence it must bring. Knowing you have that foundation, regardless of outward appearances.
I agree. It's the security, the lack of needing external validation through possessions.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Something super personal that Housel covers is how you and me see money differently. Our backgrounds matter hugely, right?
Oh, massively. Imagine someone whose formative years were during crazy high inflation versus someone who grew up during a long economic boom. Their gut feelings about saving, spending, debt, risk, they'll be fundamentally different.
Because their experiences taught them different lessons.
Exactly. And that's why the book warns us to be really careful about comparing our financial situation or decisions to others. Everyone's operating with a different mental map, shaped by their unique history. What feels right or smart for one person might feel totally wrong or foolish to another, just because their life experiences differ.
So judging others, or even taking advice too readily without considering context, can be misleading.
Very much so. You need to understand your own biases and history first.
And then, just to make it more complicated, Housel reminds us, you'll change. So plan for that. We aren't static beings, are we?
Not at all. What you desperately want in your 20s might seem unimportant, even silly, by the time you're in your 40s or 60s. Your goals, your values, even your risk tolerance evolves.
So locking yourself into super rigid long-term plans based on who you are today could be a mistake.
It really can. This makes things like flexibility and optionality incredibly valuable, though often underrated financial tools. Building room to maneuver, to adapt as your life and priorities shift is so important for long-term well-being. Don't paint yourself into a corner financially based on who you are right now.
And alongside planning for personal change, he gives a warning about external influences. Beware of narratives. What's he getting at there?
He's pointing out how much we're drawn to stories, especially dramatic ones. The media loves highlighting the exceptions, the instant lottery winner, the tech founder who risked it all on one bet.
The outliers.
Exactly. But those outliers aren't the norm. Relying on those narratives can be really dangerous. It's far better to focus on the boring stuff. Data, probabilities, consistent behaviors that work for most people over time, rather than getting swayed by compelling but ultimately unhelpful stories of extremes.
Like avoiding the get-rich-quick schemes or the constant market crashes come in headlines.
Precisely those kinds of things. And this connects to another key idea. You absolutely have to define the game you're playing. Are you investing for retirement in 30 years? Or are you trying to make a quick profit trading stocks this month? Those are completely different games with different rules, different time horizons, different acceptable risks.
And you shouldn't take advice or cues from people playing a different game.
Absolutely not. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Know your own goals, your own timeline, your own tolerance for risk, and stick to strategies that fit your game.
It seems like all these points really circle back to one core theme. Prioritize sustainable, flashy.
That sums it up beautifully. Long-term success isn't about pulling off brilliant, high-risk maneuvers that look impressive for a moment. It's about finding reasonable, consistent actions you can stick with indefinitely, without burning out or blowing up.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the psychology of money, let's quickly recap the big takeaways. It feels like the main message is that financial success hinges more on our behavior, our discipline, patience, than just raw intellect.
Definitely. And that time is your greatest asset, thanks to compounding.
Right. And that true wealth often is invisible. It's about freedom and control over your life, bought with the money you don't spend.
Mm-hmm. And finally, recognizing that your personal history shapes your financial views, so comparing yourself to others isn't usually very helpful.
It's a different way of thinking about money entirely.
It really is. And understanding this psychology isn't like reaching a final destination. It's an ongoing process of learning about yourself, adapting, but remembering that consistent, reasonable actions beat those perfect but impossible plans every time. That's the key. Find your sustainable path.
So, here's a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. If true wealth is invisible, and its greatest reward is freedom, what invisible assets are you consciously building right now to buy more of that freedom in your own life? Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some valuable food for thought about your own relationship with money. Until next time.